and lascivious note with the drawing of well, perhaps an underage girl's body. Hard to say exactly what it is, but in that note, he draws an outline of a woman's naked body, a young woman's naked body, wishes Jeffrey Epstein happy birthday, and then ends it with, "May every day be another beautiful secret." Well, this is now public, and it clearly includes the president's signature. He's disputing that it's his signature, but it looks exactly like about 100 other signatures that we have from the president, including on federal legislation. So let's not allow this to be another beautiful secret before we proceed. Let's open up the Epstein files. The book also includes some disturbing, never-before-seen images that appear to depict Epstein grooming young girls. It includes a never-before-seen document where Epstein and a longtime Mar-a-Lago member are joking about selling a woman, a, quote, fully depreciated woman, to Donald Trump for $22,500. You can see it yourself if you have any doubt about it. Look, it's time for all of us to decide, Democrats and Republicans alike. The country is unified around this. Are we going to be on the side of transparency and accountability, or are we going to be on the side of the human traffickers and those who collaborate with them and collude with them and protect them? There is a stench of corruption, predation, and exploitation that now hangs over this whole matter. And we are seeing one of the greatest cover-ups of our century unfolding in real time. Which side are we on? And that cover-up, of course, starts with Alex Acosta, Donald Trump's Secretary of Labor, who gave Epstein a ridiculous plea bargain, ending the federal case against him for no apparent reason other than his wealth, his connections, his political power. There was a multi-count federal indictment ready to go, and Alex Acosta, who was the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of Florida, gave it up and instead traded it for one count of solicitation. It didn't even mention child sex trafficking. One count of solicitation under Florida state law. He got the sweetest of sweetheart contracts. He was free in the daytime for several months, and then he went and spent the night in jail. And allegedly, he continued his criminal activities, grooming and procuring girls and having sex with underage girls and young women. So, this is about corruption. This is about the wealthy and powerful being able to manipulate the American justice system to get away with their crimes against kids. Let's release the file to the public. Vote yes on this, everybody. Let's make some history today. Let's make some history that we are going to see that the Epstein files actually come to light. That's what America wants. The most liberal people, the most conservative people, people across the spectrum want to see the files. We don't want dribs and drabs of the files they want us to see. We want the files they don't want us to see. We want the entire case file that they've got. Let's clear the air. Let's get the truth and the facts out there. Let's put an end to this corruption and cover-up. Let's do it on a bipartisan basis. I hope my colleagues will support the amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California, does the gentleman insist on his point of order?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman's amendment would introduce...
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, I fail to see.
Gentleman is recognized to speak to his objection.
I fail to see how the gentleman's obvious case of Trump derangement syndrome has anything to do with this bill affecting immigration law. It's therefore not germane. I also question whether the gentleman's vicious attack on the president's character is in violation of the House rules, but I'll stick with the germaneness question for now.
Does the gentleman wish to speak on...
I certainly do. I don't know what deranged Trump syndrome is because I've not met with his psychiatrist, so I don't know what you're referring to with deranged Trump syndrome. In any event, you haven't contradicted a single fact that I put forward. It seems like you want to try to impinge on my free speech rights or my speech and debate rights. That's a bizarre turn of events, given that we've just been talking about the First Amendment and freedom of speech. But in any event, this is completely material and relevant. It's about The Acosta deal is about providing immunity from federal prosecution to Epstein and all of his unnamed co-conspirators. They were protected by that sweetheart deal. And this is about child sex trafficking, and the legislation is all about the protection of children. I don't see how it could be more aligned with the legislation here. Look, if you oppose it, if you don't want the file coming out, at least have the backbone and the courage to stand up and say you don't want it coming out. But don't say this isn't relevant to the protection of children. Give me a break. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I would just point out that the Oversight Committee is conducting an investigation, and in fact, it's the Oversight Committee that subpoenaed the very document the chairman referenced in his statement, so they are doing their work there, and they will be deposing the gentleman he recognized in his comments, Mr. Acosta, and I think in 2 weeks that deposition is slated to happen. The gentleman's amendment does not satisfy the subject matter and fundamental purposes test, therefore it is not germane and is out of order.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to appeal that. And the reason is, Epstein used a ring of associates to rotate the women and girls in and out of sexual servitude, and many of them came from outside of the country. So this is all about human trafficking. He ran an international sex ring, and now you want to say it's not relevant to the legislation, which deals with the protection of children. I do appeal that.
I'm just following the rules.
Chairman, I move to table the appeal.
The gentleman has moved to table the appeal.
Mr. Chairman,
All those in favor
Mr.
of
Chairman,
tabling?
I have a point of order.
Gentlelady can state her point of order.
Mr. Chairman, could you give the rationale for why this is not germane? Because I simply don't understand it. I mean, the fact that the Oversight Committee is doing something does not negate our ability to do something. If you want to vote against the amendment, I suppose you could do that. But why is it not germane? This bill is about unaccompanied minors. We know that there is trafficking. It is about trafficking. It is about sexual abuse. It is about all the things that the release of the Epstein documents are also about. So what is the rationale for ruling it not germane versus you saying that you don't support the amendment, which
No, I didn't say I didn't support the amendment. I said that it's not germane. It doesn't fit under the rules. An amendment may make the effectiveness of a bill subject to a condition if that condition is related to the provisions of the bill. An amendment
But this is related to provisions of the bill.
Does not satisfy the rules, and that is why it's not germane.
So there's no rationale.
There's been appeal of the ruling of the chair. There's been a motion to table that. The question is on tabling of the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
I'd like a recorded vote, Mr. Chairman.
Recorded vote being requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Issa? Mr. Biggs? Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes aye. Mr. Tiffany? Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey votes no. Mr. Roy? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Fitzgerald votes aye. Mr. Klein? Mr. Gooden? Mr. Van Drew? Mr. Nels? Mr. Nels votes yes. Mr. Moore? Mr. Kiley? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes yes. Ms. Lee? Ms. Lee votes yes. Mr. Hunt? Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry votes aye. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes aye. Mr. Knott? Mr. Knott votes yes. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris votes yes. Mr. Onder? Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt votes aye. Mr. Gill? Mr. Baumgartner? Mr. Baumgartner votes aye. Mr. Raskin?
No.
Mr. Raskin votes no. Mr. Knapp?
Basis, and we should be empowering D.C. to fix its own problems. We know that this bill further limits D.C.'s autonomy. The bill limits D.C.'s ability to respond to an emergency and could cause chaos in the D.C. Code. The purpose of the D.C. Home Rule Act, the foundation of the D.C. government, is to, and I quote, grant to the inhabitants of the District of Columbia powers of local self-government, and to relieve Congress of the burden of legislating upon essentially local district matters, end quote. The Home Rule Reduction Act does just the opposite. It restricts powers of local self-government and increases the burden on Congress to legislate on local D.C. matters. Now, the bill endangers residents and visitors by limiting the authority of both the mayor and council to respond to an emergency, and that is dangerous. The bill strips the mayor of authority to issue executive orders and regulations that take effect immediately, even in the event of an emergency, such as a need to protect the peace, health, or safety of residents. Now, this bill requires executive orders and regulations to be transmitted to Congress for a 60-day congressional review before they take effect. The bill does not contain an exception for an emergency, and that is highly problematic. The bill also allows Congress to use a disapproval resolution for individual provisions of a D.C. bill rather than only for the entire bill. Giving Congress a line item veto for D.C. bills will cause chaos in the D.C. Code. Members of Congress will introduce disapproval resolutions on individual provisions without understanding how those provisions affect other provisions of the bill undergoing the congressional review process or the D.C. Code. That means more congressional micromanagement and more meddling in the democratic process. And that is less local authority and control for the people that have been elected to serve D.C. residents. I urge members to vote no on the Home Rule Reduction Act, and with that, I yield back.
The ranking member yields back. I now recognize the sponsor of the bill, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's once again Liberation Day in Washington, D.C. Today we will take steps to end the lawlessness in our nation's capital. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the U.S. Constitution, also known as the Enclave Clause, established the District of Columbia as a seat of the federal government. Furthermore, under the Constitution's District Clause, Congress retains ultimate responsibility for the government of the District of Columbia. Very important. Yet in recent years, the D.C. Council has advanced a series of dangerous soft-on-crime measures to weaken law enforcement and ignore public safety. My bill, H.R. 5183, the District of Columbia Home Rule Improvement Act, will restore Congress's power over D.C. given to us by President Nixon and the Home Rule Act of 1973. This 1973 law created a review period giving Congress the ability to block bills in the federal district through a resolution in the House and the Senate signed by the President. My bill improves this process and mimics the Congressional Review Act that we all know and love. Now, H.R. 5183 makes simple fixes to improve Congress's oversight of D.C. It gives Congress a uniform 60 days to review D.C. laws. It provides expedited procedures for resolutions to pass both houses and avoid stalemates we've seen in the past. It establishes safeguards on D.C. emergency procedures by preventing the Council from extending emergency waivers of congressional review to pass non-emergency laws. It expands congressional review to line item provisions of D.C. laws, mayoral, executive orders, and regulations. It empowers every member of Congress with the same ability to move a resolution of disapproval out of the committee. It promotes efficient governance by preventing the D.C. Council from passing legislation similar to those that have already been repealed by Congress. And finally, it requires accountability from both the D.C. government and this committee through an annual report to Congress and hearing. Unfortunately, the D.C. Council has shown time and time again it cannot be trusted to put public safety first. In fact, Congress's oversight of D.C. Home Rule is not new. In 2023, Congress exercised its constitutional authority over D.C. laws to block an anti-police bill. Not surprisingly, bleeding heart Joe Biden vetoed the resolution. Back in 2015, the House passed another resolution to overturn a District of Columbia pro-abortion bill, but it died in the Senate after running out of time. My bill reflects long-standing conservative principles, upholding the Constitution, defending law and order, and ensuring that the federal government fulfills its duty to safeguard the nation's capital. We aren't here today at this hearing because D.C. reckless policies make our jobs inconvenient. We are here as friends, parents, and grandparents, in my case, to address violence in the city. Hardworking Americans should be able to visit our nation's capital without fear of harm. Interns and staff should be able to walk the streets of Washington, D.C. and feel safe from career violent criminals repeatedly set free. Clearly, the D.C. government recognizes it needed the president's help because it established a juvenile curfew and issued a mayoral executive order to facilitate a local federal police partnership. We need to do better and do a better job, and my bill is a solution. I look forward to working with the president, Chairman Comer, and my colleagues to fight back against this D.C. disorder. My bill, H.R. 5183, the District of Columbia Home Rule Improvement Act, acts on Congress's authority to update the Home Rule Act with common sense oversight abilities. I ask my colleagues to support for my bill, H.R. 5183, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly oppose this bill. It is a profoundly harmful bill masquerading as a congressional procedure bill. In fact, it is one of the biggest reductions in the District of Columbia's authority since Congress passed the Home Rule Act in 1973. Unlike many of the bills we are considering today, this bill does not amend or repeal a law enacted by D.C. Instead, it imposes a significant new limits on the authority of both the D.C. mayor and council to govern. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record letters opposing this bill from D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and the entire D.C. Council and the D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab.
Without objection, so ordered.
This bill limits the mayor's authority to respond to emergencies. Under the bill, an executive order or regulation issued by the mayor takes effect after a 60 legislative day congressional period unless a disapproval resolution is enacted during that period. This means the mayor no longer can implement an executive order or regulation immediately, no matter how urgent it might be, such as it is in response to civil unrest or a public health emergency. This bill limits the council's authority to legislate in an emergency. Under the Home Rule Act, an emergency bill takes effect immediately and remains in effect up to 90 days. Under this bill, however, a successive emergency bill enacted by D.C. takes effect after a 60-day legislative day congressional review period unless a disapproval resolution is enacted during that period. The new rules this bill establishes for a successive emergency bill can prevent the council from responding to an emergency that lasts more than 90 days, depending on the congressional calendar. In addition, the council often uses successive emergency bills to fill gaps in law caused by the congressional review period for the temporary and permanent versions of an emergency bill. While the Home Rule Act is silent on this matter, the courts have long said that the council has this authority. This bill takes away this authority. In practice, this means D.C. laws will change constantly. Laws will expire only to be revised, only to be revived when the congressional review period for a bill ends. Adding to the chaos, this bill gives Congress a line item veto during the congressional review period for bills enacted by D.C. Currently, disapproval resolutions can only disapprove an entire bill. This bill permits a disapproval resolution on individual provisions of a bill. Under the Home Rule Act, it is easier procedurally for Congress to disapprove a criminal bill enacted by D.C. than a civil bill enacted by D.C. this bill makes the duration of the congressional review bill for a civil bill and the procedure for a disapproval resolution on a civil bill the same as those that currently apply to a criminal bill. Under this bill, the congressional review period for a civil bill, which is currently 30 legislative days, is 60 legislative days, and a disapproval resolution for a civil bill is eligible for a motion to discharge a to discharge from committee, which currently is not. I urge my colleagues to see this bill for what it really is and vote no. And I yield back to.
Gentlelady yields back. Do any other member? I know Mr. Bell seeks recognition. Is any Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs, then we'll go to Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I support the bill. And I would just point out what makes D.C. different than any other municipality in the country. So when you can stand up and say, I was mayor of San Bernardino, whatever it is, but there is no other municipality in the country that is addressed in Article 1, Section 8. In Article 1, Section 8, describing the District of Columbia, says that Congress shall have power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district. Reference, the District of Columbia. That is different than any other municipality in the country. And I'll just continue on. Over such district as may, by session of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of the government of the United States, which is exactly what the District of Columbia is. And to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be. That's what makes it unique, and that's what makes Congress have the authority. That's what grants Congress the authority to actually legislate in the District of Columbia. That's what's unique about it. You've chosen to live in the most unique city perhaps in the world where the federal government has authority to legislate within your municipality. There's no other jurisdiction in the country that we can say that about, and no other municipal jurisdiction. And thus, when things seem to be out of control or not going well, Congress has exclusive legislation. That's what the Constitution says. And you can disregard that. You may not like that. I'm sorry. Everybody on this dais took an oath to adhere to the Constitution of the United States of America. And that's right in the Constitution. You want to change? You got to change the Constitution. With that, I'll yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar.
I thank the gentleman from Arizona. Now, we just heard that this new bill, 5183, restricts the DC's ability and mayors to respond to emergencies. This is blatantly false. The District of Columbia Home Rule Improvement Act does not prohibit the DC Council or the mayor from passing emergency legislation with waivers from the congressional review. It prohibits the extension until reviewed. It prohibits the extension until review is done. So once again, we're hearing the sky is falling, but as my colleague from Arizona talked about, this is a unique city, a very unique city. And you chose to live in it. And now what we have to do is we have to make sure that everybody profits from this. Everybody has a right to be safe, to expect to be able to walk and enjoy the city. So there needs to be accountability. The other thing is everything was put for 60 days because that's just a uniform aspect because Congress wasn't doing its due diligence on the 30-day aspect. So from that standpoint, that's why we went to a consolidated 60-day review. So with that being said, I hope that the misnomers are being laid out and that everybody can vote for this. And so I will yield back to the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Bell from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I associate myself with my colleague, Representative Norton, who I think made an eloquent argument on why this bill is not in the interest of D.C. or in democracy, which is what I want to talk about. And my colleague on the other side referred to it as Liberation Day, and I'm really scratching my head here. Like, it's literally the opposite of liberation. Remember that whole thing about no taxation without representation? We literally fought a war over it to ensure that folks, one man, one woman, one vote. And so we can look at Article 1, Section 8, but let's not forget that the default in our Constitution is democracy. It just seems like a very inauthentic argument to say that Washington, D.C. is unique, but Washington, D.C. is unique because you made it that way, and you continue to vote in a manner to keep it in this way, to keep folks in D.C. from having statehood or enjoying the rights that the other states in the country enjoy. And what we've seen is historically, when governments want to take power, when governments want to usurp the government that's in place, they always will come up with these justifications or put these spins on it to make it sound like they're for the people, when in fact they are against the people, because the people in D.C. have voted for what they want in their government, in their law enforcement and things of that nature. And so, my God, I understand that you've been given talking points, but for God's sakes, at least make it make sense. This is not liberation. This is literally the opposite by definition of liberation. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Higgins from Louisiana, then Mr. Subraman will be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To address the gentleman's points regarding the means by which our nation's capital is governed and populated, and the unique interaction with the seat of government as it was envisioned by our founders and enshrined in our Constitution, as the gentleman from Arizona clarified. Our founders discussed, for my young colleagues' benefit, I'm sure he knows, he's a very educated man, and I'm certain you've read the Federalist Papers and the private discussions of our founders, and they talked about this. They talked about we were to create the seat of government of a new republic born, where the capital city of the United States would be built and centered. What would be the rules there? What would be the dimensions? What would be the construct of what was envisioned as the capital city of our republic? And the founders discussed, representation according to as compared to apportionment for the states, and what would happen when the capital of our nation, which no doubt would become a density of population, which it has. They were right. What would happen regarding the representative rights of those citizens? if they did not have the standard apportionment of, say, a sovereign state. And the founders talked about not only the unique relationship of the United States Congress with our nation's capital and our responsibility and our rights to be involved in the governance of the nation's capital city, but the unique rights and access to government for the residents of D.C. Only in Washington, D.C. is the only city in the United States where the resident of that city can interact with the entire seat of your national government with a sign in your yard. While walking your dog in the evening or enjoying a meal, maybe sitting next to congressmen and senators, members of the executive branch, senior judges in Article 3, senior bureaucrats from the seat of our government. The citizens of Phoenix or New Orleans or New York don't enjoy that access. The founders discussed this, and if you haven't read it, I suggest that you do, because it was clearly recognized that D.C. was going to have a unique role to play for the entire republic. And the citizens of the envisioned capital city would enjoy a special access to government. They'll be uniquely represented. And there had to be a balance, which is why our founding document was constructed as it was, and the writ of our Constitution addressed the capital city in the manner that it did, and these laws were enshrined. And here we are today. We have a responsibility as the people's house to be sometimes involved at a greater level in the operations of our nation's capital. This is the way the nation's capital's governance was envisioned. It has been an interesting ride for 200 years. And here we are today. You know, we're doing our best. Respectfully to my colleagues across the aisle, I would hope that you could step back and support these series of legislative efforts to help D.C. today. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Subraman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like we're talking past each other a little bit. I understand that this is in the Constitution, that Congress has oversight over D.C. What I don't understand is why we're asking for line item vetoes of D.C. legislation. Not even the mayor has that power right now. We're making individual members of Congress more powerful than the mayor of D.C. over D.C. matters. No D.C. resident elected any of us. They had the ability to elect their mayor instead, though, under D.C. Council. And the second thing that we're doing here is we're extending the congressional review period. I don't understand why we have to do that. Why isn't 30 days enough? Why isn't the current process enough? There's a D.C. law you don't like. Well, we have several other bills here to address all the laws that a majority on this committee don't like today. Why isn't that enough? I think if you sat in the coffee shops and restaurants of D.C. and had residents have special access to you, you'll see that they're not happy with what this is because they had no say in what's happening today. And so I understand Congress's power over D.C. What I don't understand is why we have to take extreme measures. I think I do understand it's political, it seems, right? It's in reaction to political desires, but I don't think this is good for the city. I certainly don't think this is good for safety. It's not going to help anything, in my opinion. I'm going to yield over to gentleman, Mr. Bell from Missouri.
Thank you. And if we're going to talk about history, we can't just cherry pick which history we're going to talk about. Many of our states were initially territories. And many of those territories became states from negotiations, from compromises, many over the slavery issue. And so when we're talking about DC and leaving it in this box as if it can't evolve to where the people have actual representation, as my colleague pointed out. The argument goes against democratic principles that folks here are being, policies are being implemented by people that were not, in fact, voted by them, which is unique, but not in a good way. So we can't really talk about the history without understanding how that history evolved and how different states evolved from territories. And you brought up the Federalist Papers, and so let's talk about that. In Federalist 43, James Madison said, and I quote, "A municipal legislature for local purposes derived from their own suffrages will of course be allowed them." So when we look at our Constitution, which intended that we be a democratic nation, which I think we all agree on, when we look at the Federalist Papers, and when we just look at what is aligned with our values, I think the answer is clear, and that folks in D.C. should be afforded the same rights that every other American is afforded across this great nation. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member seek recognition? Seeing none. The question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 5183 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is ordered favorably reported as amended. A recorded vote is ordered as previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 2693, the District of Columbia Electronic Transmittal of Legislation Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 2693, the District of Columbia Electronic Transmittal of Legislation Act, a bill to amend the District of Columbia Home Rule Act to permit the Chairman of the Council of the District of Columbia to transmit acts of the District of Columbia to Congress in electronic form.
Without objection, the bill shall be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection to order, the chair recognizes himself to order an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2693 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and amendment. I am pleased to support H.R. 2693, which authorizes the electronic transfer of D.C. Council legislative action to Congress for review. The current requirement for the hand delivery of physical copies of D.C. Council legislation has created delays in receiving documents and inconsistent timelines between the House and Senate for commencing the congressional review period under the Home Rule Act. This legislation will also save taxpayer dollars and free up staff time in both the district and Congress. I thank Representative Norton for introducing this common sense legislation and urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill. I now recognize the ranking member for his statement.
Thank you, Chairman Comer. I also want to first just say and thank Congresswoman Norton for this legislation. We, of course, Democrats strongly support any opportunities to modernize government in a way that makes it more efficient and centers the residents. This bill would amend the District of Columbia Home Rule Act as well as the House and Senate rules to permit the chair of the Council of D.C. to transmit local laws or acts of D.C. to Congress in electronic form. Now, currently, House and Senate practice requires any acts to be passed by the Council and delivered in actual physical hard format copy. Now, this, of course, is outdated and can be costly. Allowing the Council to transmit acts of Congress electronically is a common sense efficiency for the modern era. It will reduce the time and effort required by both Council and congressional staff to deliver, receive, and process those acts. I want to thank my colleague, Ms. Norton, for this legislation, and I thank the chairman for being a co-sponsor. It's good to have a bipartisan bill in front of us today. This is a reasonable, good government effort by our committee and should be engaged in. I urge all my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
I now recognize the chairman of the or the sponsor of this legislation, Ms. Norton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank Chairman Comer for co-sponsoring and marking up this bill. This bill brings the congressional review process for the legislation enacted by D.C. into the electronic age by allowing the chair of the D.C. Council to transmit legislation to Congress electronically. The D.C. government supports this bill. The Home Rule Act requires the chair of the council to transmit a bill to Congress for a review period before it can take effect. A bill takes effect after the review period unless a resolution of disapproval is enacted during that period. The Home Rule Act is silent on the form of transmittal, but Congress has always required bills to be transmitted physically. Electronic records are recognized as valid under the federal and state law, and the federal government and state and local governments conduct official business electronically. Federal agencies transmit regulations and other documents to the Federal Register electronically. Congress already conducts some official business electronically. For example, the House permits members, including acting through their staff, to introduce legislation and submit statements to the congressional record electronically. The requirement that the council transmit bills physically imposes unnecessary costs on DC. The council engages in a 12-step process to transmit bills, including printing 2 copies of each bill and committee reports, arranging a time for delivery of these documents to the offices of the Speaker and President of the Senate, and having 2 staffers drive to the Capitol to deliver the documents. 2 are required because of parking requirements and restrictions. The requirement that the council transmit these bills physically also imposes unnecessary costs on Congress. The following congressional offices and committees are involved in the transmittal progress: the offices of the Speaker and the President of the Senate, the House and Senate parliamentarians, the House Clerk, the Senate Secretary, this committee, and the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. The difficulty the council has transmitting bills physically had transmitting physical bills during the pandemic, and the January 6th highlights the need for electronic transmittal. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Do any other members seek recognition on the bill? Seeing none. The question is on the the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, the amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favorably reporting H.R. 2693 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, the bill is ordered favorably reported as amended.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a vote?
A recorded vote is ordered by Mr. Gosar. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 5103, Make the District of Columbia Safe Again, or Make the District of Columbia Safe and Beautiful Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5103, a bill to establish a program to beautify the District of Columbia and establish the District of Columbia Safe and Beautiful Commission.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5103, as offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. I support this legislation, which codifies core components of President Trump's Executive Order 1425-2 to require the formation of a D.C. Safe and Beautiful Commission. The D.C. Safe and Beautiful Commission, made up of key federal law enforcement, will be focused on ensuring full enforcement of federal and local laws in the district. The commission will develop recommendations on how to prioritize the safety of the district's residents and visitors. The bill also requires the development and implementation of a D.C. beautification plan. Key federal and local leaders will be tasked with coordinating the cleanliness of the district's facilities, infrastructure, and parks. These leaders will also work to restore federal public monuments, statues, markers, and similar properties that have been defaced. I thank Representative McGuire for leading this bill that will further congressional backing to the President's executive actions, and I urge all my colleagues to support the McGuire legislation. I now recognize the ranking member for his statement.
Thank you, Chairman. We Democrats strongly oppose the Make the District of Columbia Safe and Beautiful Act as another attempt to limit D.C.'s home rule and its own governance over its own laws and community. Now, this bill establishes a federal commission with sweeping authority over local matters that should be decided by D.C. residents and their elected representatives. The people of D.C. need more ability to make their own future and control their own community, not less. Now, as my colleagues know from their home districts, public safety priorities belong in local hands, not dictated by an administration that won't put D.C. or its communities first. Now, we know that federal resources and cooperation certainly can be valuable to a city, but this commission is really not about supporting D.C. residents. This legislation explicitly directs the commission to push D.C. to adopt the administration's mass deportation agenda, which has caused chaos throughout our country and here in the district as well. We do not need to be supporting efforts where masked men are kidnapping people and residents off the streets, not just here in the district, but across the country. And this bill, which talks about beautifying D.C., is explicitly linked to a mass deportation agenda, trying to enshrine that here in the District of Columbia. These policies, we know, actually undermine public safety. When hardworking immigrants fear deportation, they are less likely to report crimes. That is also a fact. And everyone becomes less safe as a result. The hardworking men and women that are working in the restaurants in D.C.'s, cooking, working hard, at car washes, gardening, doing the hard work oftentimes that others may not want to do, deserve respect and not to be living in this community in fear. Now, Republicans used to be the party of respecting state and local authority, but now you're advocating for a long-term plan to give Donald Trump power over the wishes of its residents. According to a recent poll, 80% of D.C. residents oppose President Trump's control of D.C. police and the surge of federal troops patrolling the streets. 80%. None of our Republican colleagues would accept that level of federal micromanagement in their districts. If we were serious about making D.C. more safe and beautiful, we wouldn't stop D.C. from spending its own tax revenue, which Republicans did earlier this year, blocking $1 billion in D.C. funds from being spent. Money that could actually be spent making the district more beautiful and safe, as this bill says it's attempting to do. Now, I urge my colleagues to vote no on this legislation and instead support real partnership and respecting the local needs and democratic principles of the local elected officials who are actually working to make this community more safe and secure. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the sponsor of the bill, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a father of 5, as a Navy SEAL veteran, my #1 priority in Congress is to keep the American people safe at home and abroad. Now, I've heard someone say that this was extreme measures, but I think people dying, and the bottom line, Mr. Chairman, is people were dying way too much in the District of Columbia. The American dream is to live, work, and raise your family in peace, regardless of race, party, religion, or creed. You should be able to walk down any street in America with your little girl or little boy and be safe. You should be able to get on the subway. You should be able to ride a bicycle or drive your car. And I've seen in the news where a woman said it's the first time in D.C. in 10 years where she feels safe driving with her windows down. I think many of us remember the newly engaged couple that was killed outside the Israeli embassy. We all know about the 21-year-old staffer who was shot in a drive-by. Bottom line is people are dying, so this is not extreme. This is required. We must keep the American people safe. My bill, the Make the District of Columbia Safe and Beautiful Act, codifies President Trump's Executive Order 14252 and ensures our nation's capital is clean, safe, and beautiful. Our nation's capital is a direct reflection of our great country and should be a symbol of pride for the American people and a safe and beautiful location for all to reside and visit. Unfortunately, years of soft on-crime policies have turned Washington, D.C. into a city of high crime rates, rampant homelessness, and graffiti on historic buildings and monuments. In 2024, D.C. had the 4th highest homicide rate in the country, and since the beginning of 2025, there have already been over 1,600 violent crimes reported in our nation's capital. Since President Trump cracked down on crime in D.C., violent crime is down 45%. I wish I'd see folks on the other side talk about all the lives that have been saved. Carjackings have decreased 87%. We've heard of minors coming in from Maryland with a gun hijacking cars. It's down 87%. Why couldn't they do that before Trump got here? And overall, crime has dropped 15%. There have been 2,120 arrests, 20 of which were gang members. Why do you want to protect gang members? These statistics prove that law and order works. We should keep the American people safe. My bill codifies many elements of President Trump's successful executive order until 2029, ensuring there isn't a backslide into lawlessness in the city. This bill is not partisan, it is common sense, and this should not be based on Democrat, Republican, or independent. It should be based on common sense and keeping you alive. Wanting our nation's capital to be safe is not political. It is the best interest of all who travel to and call Washington, D.C. their home. I urge all my colleagues on this committee to vote in favor of my bill and take a stand to make D.C. safe and beautiful. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly oppose the Make the District of Columbia Safe and Beautiful Act. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record letters opposing this bill from D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, the entire D.C. Council, and D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab.
Without objection, to ordered.
First, this bill disparages D.C. and perpetuates the misinformation and disinformation the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress have spread about the safety and beauty of D.C. I encourage tourists to continue to visit D.C. and businesses and people to continue to move this wonderful city. D.C. is a world-class city, full stop. Second, the bill establishes a commission and taxes it with several functions I oppose. For example, the commission is directed to develop and encourage the implementation of policies that, quote, will direct the maximum of enforcement in federal immigration law within the District of Columbia, including policies to encourage the reduction of available federal safe or local law enforcement resources to apprehend and deport illegal aliens, close quote. The last thing DC needs is more masked ICE agents terrorizing communities, separating families, and shuttering the community trust needed for effective local policing. If the federal government wants to improve DC, it should start by investing in the assets it owns here. For example, 90% of parkland in DC is owned by the federal government. While I strongly support the mission of the National Park Service and its employees, the agency is grossly underfunded, and its deferred maintenance backlog in DC alone is more than $1.5 billion with a B dollars. The National Park Service has lost a quarter of its employees either through firings or resignations during the Trump administration. The administration's fiscal year 26 budget required the largest funding cut in the history of the National Park Service. I urge a no vote on this bill. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Does any other member seek recognition on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Okay. Do you all want to speak now before Mr. Bell files an amendment? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to recognize Mr. Higgins, and we'll go Ms. Randall.
I just want to note that I support my colleague's bill here. And I just want to clarify, this is like a law enforcement positive and enforcement of law-centric bill. It establishes a commission that covers a broad spectrum of the federal government involvement, the Department of Transportation, the Department of the Interior, Department of Homeland Security, Federal Bureau of Investigation, United States Marshal Service, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Maryland, the United States Attorney's Office for Eastern District of Virginia. And the functions, the number one function, the function of the committee to recommend actions and review the effectiveness of such actions with respect to the following, and it goes on to cite several things, but a key function of the commission that this legislation would create is to work in collaboration with its leadership and union, ensuring the Metropolitan Police Department and the District of Columbia is provided with assistance to facilitate the recruitment, retention, and capabilities of its officers. No regular American looking back at our nation's capital say, why would anyone in our nation's capital reject such a thing? Why would you reject the idea of having the federal government coordinate with the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department to assist them to facilitate in recruitment, retention, and capabilities of its officers to fight crime in your city? So, Mr. Chairman, I support this bill, and I just wanted to take this moment to clarify that this is a law enforcement-centric bill. It will help the District of Columbia, and I encourage my colleagues to support the bill. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this bill might sound reasonable on the surface, but when we dig into what it actually does, it's about forcing local communities to abandon policies that keep their residents safe and protected. Despite the words safe and beautiful being in the title, the devil is in the details. And the American people have seen the ugly, dangerous impacts of another bill that included beautiful in the title not so long ago. This bill would compel DC to coordinate and operate with federal immigration officers. Here's what happens when local authorities are forced to do immigration enforcement instead of focusing on their actual job, keeping us safe. On the Olympic Peninsula in my district, we are currently fighting the largest active fire in Washington state, with another fire sparking over the weekend. The Bear Gulch fire is estimated to be more than 10,000 acres and under 9% contained. Wildland firefighting is one of the most dangerous and critical public safety duties, and I applaud the hardworking crew members who put their lives on the line to perform these life-saving duties, staying for 2 weeks at a time in tents in a field, leaving their family, their day jobs to do this work to keep our communities safer. And yet, on August 27th, instead of being able to conduct their critical work, 44 crew members were forced to stand in line for hours, mostly brown-skinned crew members, to show their IDs to immigration enforcement. Customs and Border Patrol arrested 2 crew members, and dozens more were pulled away from performing fuel management during an active wildfire. It's absolutely unacceptable that these resources were diverted and that non-critical personnel from Customs and Border Patrol were allowed to enter a restricted fire area without carrying red cards. Local communities know what works for their residents. This bill takes that choice away and makes all of us less safe. That's why I'm voting no. And I urge my colleagues to do so as well. I yield the balance of my time to the ranking member.
Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Does any other member seek recognition? Ms. Stansberry from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say welcome to the people of Washington, D.C., who have flooded this hearing room on a day in which we are hearing a set of bills that have not so much as had a single public hearing. Let me just emphasize that. Not a single bill on this docket has had a public hearing as of yet. And I don't think that it is any mistake that this markup to vote these bills out of committee is happening on the last day that Donald Trump has ordered our nation's National Guard to occupy this city. There are no coincidences here, folks. So I have some questions for the chairman because we don't actually have witnesses here to testify about these bills. So my first question for you, Mr. Chairman, is where did these bills come from? Where did this package come from?
We've been talking about these bills for a year now, and you know that, Ms. Stansberry.
But why is this package being brought forward today?
This is a markup. That's when you vote on bills.
I understand the congressional procedure, but why is this committee marking up a set of bills today without a hearing? Did the president ask you to do this?
We're debating the bills as we speak. That's what a markup is.
Mr. Comer, did the president ask you to hold this?
I haven't talked to the president.
Was this markup called pursuant to the president's occupation of Washington, D.C.?
We've had this markup on the books for a long time.
And so there was no
markup
coordination with
You're participating in a markup.
There was no coordination with the White House on this markup.
I haven't talked to the White House, but I mean, there's
so
always
didn't consult with the White House on this bill?
We support the president's.
You didn't consult with the White House on the development of a bill that would create the actual entity that he said he wanted? There was no coordination with the White House on this bill?
We support what the president's done. We've sat back and watched, and we've seen the crime rates go down significantly in Washington, D.C., and we want to make sure that crime stays down in Washington, D.C. If you don't like the bill, you can vote against it.
No, I'm asking you a question because we haven't heard this bill. Was this bill drafted in coordination with the White House? I'm asking the question.
It's not my bill.
Okay. Does the sponsor want to answer that question?
I would say that we support President Trump, and bottom line.
Just a simple question. Did you coordinate with the White House in the development of this bill?
People are dying in Washington, D.C.
Why can't
Crime
you
has
answer
been
the
cleaned
question?
up.
Mr. Chairman, we need order. We need order. Mr. Chairman.
It's just a question.
This isn't a debate.
With
Mr. Chairman, we need order.
This actually is the debate. That
Ms.
is
Sainsbury
exactly
is
what
out
a
of order.
markup is, my dear. This is a debate over the bill.
This should be common
Did you
sense. We're
guys
just trying to keep
coordinate-
the American people safe. They're dying in D.C.
I just asked you a
and
simple
we are looking
question.
at President Trump's plan
the people
has
of
worked.
Washington, D.C.
So
are
we
here
are going to
hear
codify
from
what
you.
President Trump did to keep the American people safe.
Okay,
I don't
thank you.
care if you're a
That answers
Democrat,
the
Republican,
question.
or Independent. We love you, but we've got to keep you safe.
Okay, let me ask you another question. I'm going to ask the sponsor this question. Have you ever been inside of City Hall? Yes or no?
I have not.
Have you ever attended a city council meeting here in Washington, D.C.?
I have spoken with people all over
Have you
D.C.
ever
and
attended a
restaurants
city
and everything
council
else.
meeting here in Washington, D.C.?
And they thank us that they can walk down the street and walk their dog and ride on a subway without getting stabbed.
Did you consult with the
Without being
mayor
part of
or
a
the
drive-by.
council or any members of
And
law
without people
enforcement
coming
in
out
the
of Baltimore
development
and other
of this
places
bill?
because they know the laws are too lax here and it's not safe.
I'm asking the sponsor of this bill, did you consult with the mayor or the city council in the development of this bill?
I consulted with the people of Washington, D.C.
You did. Can you tell us some of who you consulted with? Can you tell us who you consulted with, sir?
Congress has jurisdiction over Washington, D.C., but
No,
I
I'm
talked with
asking you a very simple question. Who did you consult
And
with?
I
Did
just
you
told you.
consult with
I just
the,
answered you, but you're
Did you
not-
consult with the law enforcement of Washington, D.C.?
I talked
in
to
the
police
development of
officers
this
as
bill?
well, yes.
I'm asking the
I did.
gentleman
I spoke with
who's-
law enforcement. I spoke with restaurant owners. I spoke with people walking their dogs all around D.C.
Oh, you
and they
you talked
said,
to people
thank
walking
God,
their dogs. That's
thank
how
God
you
we can
developed
walk
the
down the
bill.
street without being stabbed or mugged to be part of a drive-by.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't believe a Democrat, Republican, Independent would not like this common sense legislation
Sir, do you live
that
in the
keeps
Washington?
people safe.
Do you live in the Washington D.C.
Well, the
area?
gentlelady
We're all here.
I'm asking you
I've been
a
here
question.
9
Are
months.
you a resident of Washington D.C.?
recognize her colleague from Louisiana.
Sir, I have my time here. I'm asking the sponsor of the bill. You have debate time on your own. There's plenty of time to debate. Do you live here in the city of
We
Washington,
are all
D.C.?
here in D.C. representing our districts across the country.
Exactly,
And we
sir.
have jurisdiction
and so that
over
is
Washington,
exactly
D.C.
my point. If you wanted to run for mayor of Washington, D.C., then you could move to Washington and run in a democratic, free, and fair election.
Time's
and
expired.
actually become a
Gentlelady's time's
city official.
expired. Any other members seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman. I'd
Mr.
like to
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Higgins.
I'd just like to say that I'm glad that the gentlelady just performed in the manner that she did, because America is watching, and it exhibited, like this display. Your display, good lady, and I'm quite sure you're a wonderful person and your family loves you. You and I don't really know each other, so I don't mean this in a personal way. I'm just observing that your display. Thank you for enhancing the point I'm about to make. Your display demonstrates exactly the sort of elitist, arrogant tone that Americans across the country are going to recognize as the hallmark of your party. Wow. So we sit back and I would yield my entire time to you to carry on like that, like to demonstrate to the American people, this is what the Democrat
Would like
Party
to yield your time. I'm happy to take more time.
Arrogant elitism. And as you stated to me, good lady, you can have your own debate time. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Would you yield a minute to me? I have a question. I have a question.
Mr. Higgins yields back, and I just want to make sure everyone knows. Mr. Higgins spent his career in law enforcement. Mr. McGuire was a Navy SEAL. And I think they're sincere in their efforts and what we've seen over the last 3 weeks in the massive reduction in crime in Washington, D.C. And I appreciate their opinion and words of advice, and just wanted to make sure everyone knew what we were dealing with here. Now, does any other member seek recognition? Mr. Frost.
No, I just have a question for my colleague from the state of Louisiana, because I'm curious as to where your bill is. Louisiana is the state with the second highest rate of deaths in this nation. You are more likely to be shot standing on a random street in your state than you are in Washington, D.C. So my question is, where's your bill for the occupation of the state of Louisiana to keep your people safe, if you're at all sincere in this?
Gentlemen, yield for an answer.
I yield for an answer.
I support state rights. I'm a constitutionalist.
But not D.C.?
Stand by. As a constitutionalist, I support my state, my sovereign state's legislature, which is doing everything it can to push back upon the crime rate of the Democrat-controlled cities.
Okay,
of
so
New Orleans,
I'll take my time back. I'll take my time back.
If you remove
That's the
the
rules.
crime stats
That's the
of New
rules.
Orleans,
I'll take my time back.
Louisiana,
I'll take my time back. So you only invoke the rules when other people are speaking, not when you're speaking. Okay.
That's your time.
I agree with you. Look, I'm for state sovereignty. So what do you think about California?
Well, California is not where I live. You asked me about my state.
See, you only care, and I'll reclaim my time. I'll reclaim my time. I'll reclaim my time. I'll reclaim my time. I will reclaim my time. The gentleman will stop speaking. I will reclaim my time. You're more likely to be shot standing in a random street in your state,
This is
in
Mr. Frost time,
Louisiana,
Mr. Chairman.
than
This is Mr.
anywhere in
Frost time.
Washington, D.C., and you're here because you're lapdogs
Point
to
of
the
order,
President of the
Mr.
United
Chairman.
States, who during the election last year, we said time and time again, I reclaim my time.
Down, Mr. Chairman.
All right, hold on.
My colleague just called me a lapdog for the President of the United States. I move for his words to be taken down.
A second.
We'll stand in recess for a second here. We will suspend to see about taking the words down.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw my remark.
Gentlemen's asked unanimous consent to withdraw his remarks. Without objection, so ordered. We will proceed with the debate. The words were taken down, and
I will continue with the reminder.
Point of order.
Mr. Frost has
Chairman.
3 minutes. Okay, point of order.
My point was that Mr. Frost has a right to his time.
Yeah,
Unobstructed time, an opportunity to speak. And I think if we afforded him that right under the rules, then we wouldn't have this back and forth.
That's fine. He started by asking if people would yield to a question. I think that's how it all started.
He reclaimed his time, at least a half a dozen times.
I'm giving him 3 minutes. Well, even though I don't have to because of the rules, I'm giving him 3 minutes.
You're running this hearing, sir.
Okay, I'm giving.
Not a spectator.
Okay, you got 3 minutes, Mr. Frost. Go ahead.
This body is full of lapdogs, doing exactly what the president wants, when he wants it, not pushing back. And what we just heard, this exchange with me and my colleague, is indicative of the problem here. None of you know anything about Washington, D.C. You're talking about a so-called, walking down the street and talking with people that are walking their dogs, people in the restaurants you go to, which might not be full of people from D.C. anyway. And it's just sad. It is sad. We need D.C. statehood. There are people, yes, we need D.C. statehood. We need to put this behind us. We need to stop. It's wild to me that we're here debating with people from the Republican Party a party that's supposed to be about states' rights and local rule and people, the consent of the governed, which is fundamental to our Constitution and this country. But before you, we have activists, organizers, people who are here to say that they want a voice. They want to be represented by the government that they pay taxes to. Free DC. Free DC. And it's just grand to sit here with other members who have higher murder rates than Washington, D.C., but not invite the president to occupy their own state with the military. So I think it's important that we're here today to have this debate, because this is a debate about what's going on in Washington, D.C., and why every American should be concerned. And why, of course, every American should be concerned about what the president's doing, but in many cases, even more concerned about the fact that Congress and that Republicans in Congress want to do nothing about it. And in fact, they want to enable it and do anything the president says. The gentleman couldn't even answer the question about if the bill was drafted with the White House. We know it was drafted with the White House. And so we say free D.C., and we'll continue to fight for the people of Washington, D.C., who deserve for their home to be a state, who deserve for their local officials that they voted for, their city council, their members, to make decisions about how to make sure that this is a safer place. And I gotta say, when we talk about crime, when we talk about violence, gun violence has been going down in this country the last 3 years. We still have a lot of work to do, but you guys talk about it and nothing happens. We put forth solutions and pass bills like the Safer Communities Act, and violence goes down in this country. That's the difference between us. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Anybody seek recognition? Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I want to talk about a story that I think is very relevant. Brendan Ofori died after being shot on a Green Line Metro train in 2023. Only on 4, his mother tells what prosecutors told her about dropping charges against the 17-year-old's accused killer. This was a 17-year-old black teenager here in Washington that was murdered, and prosecutors dropped the charges against the man. They have photos of him, eyewitness accounts, and his murderer was never prosecuted, never went to jail. And I think that is the kind of judicial wrong that has not only happened here in Washington, D.C. to many innocent people and their family, but it's happening all over the country. And this is a very relevant conversation, because when innocent people are being murdered, especially teenagers, and their murderers are having charges dropped, or they have judges that let them off on lenient crimes, or say they're a repeat offender that has been arrested and arrested and arrested over and over and over again, and they keep getting released and they keep getting released, and there's another victim and another victim and another victim. This should go beyond political boundaries. And I can't understand how this becomes a fight about my Democrat colleagues' Trump derangement syndrome and politicizing Washington, D.C. This should be about victims of crime. And this should be the fact that we should have a justice system that holds people accountable for the crimes they commit against innocent people. And right now, we're seeing on the news an innocent woman that came from Ukraine. This woman felt safer coming from a war in Ukraine. She thought she was coming to America to be safe, and she was murdered on a train in cold blood, murdered. And we're seeing crimes like this day after day, night after night, and it goes on and on and on. And anybody wants to argue about the National Guard? What, you people want the National Guard coming in and handing out water bottles when there's some sort of natural disaster? Is that just what the National Guard is supposed to be for? Well, I'm going to tell you what's up. The National Guard is also here to protect and keep our streets and our country safe. They aren't meant to be sent over to foreign wars to go die in some foreign country. The National Guard should be used for Americans to be safe, businesses to be able to prosper, people to be able to walk with their families down the street. And I'm going to tell you something, people of Washington, D.C. in this room, Congress has jurisdiction over the District of Columbia. That's the reality. Democrats, you may not like that, but that is the reality. The bills that are being passed here and being in a public setting, being discussed and debated and being voted on are for your safety. Because what's happened, and you know it because you live here, you are living in a city filled with crime, And we have witnessed it as members of Congress. We've lived in it. A Democrat congressman just a few years ago got carjacked. We've had interns murdered on Washington, D.C. streets. And you know it because in your communities, you know people and you witness it. There's drive-by shootings, there's drug deals, and the youths of this community are being done wrong. Absolutely being done wrong. And so I'm telling you right now, I can tell you I'm from Georgia. Yes, that is where I am from. However, I come to work in Washington, D.C., and I live here when I am here for work, and I happily go back home when I am not here for work. But I will tell you there is a commitment by Republicans on this committee to stand up against crime and do what is right for the American people. And I 100%, and so do my colleagues, 100% support the use of the National Guard to clean up the crime and stop the criminals from murdering and raping and stealing and making cities unsafe. And that's the reality of where we are today. And so this debate can continue back and forth, but it is ridiculous. Fighting for criminals is a losing argument. Fighting against crime will win every single time on anybody that has common sense. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Gentlelady yields. Chair recognizes Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member. I just want to speak briefly, and thank you for the citizens of D.C. for being here today. Your presence, we honor it. It's extremely important to have you all here today to bear witness to what we're talking about. You know, I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience and also folks here behind the dais, we have been victimized and experienced violence. I don't even know how many obituaries over the years that I've had to help mothers write, how many funerals we have had to fundraise so that folks at the hands of gun violence and the permanency of poverty, we've seen it. But I want to say one thing. And so I know the hurt when we're talking about the joys of potentially seeing and experiencing a beloved community where people don't die, where young men actually grow old. So I don't understand then why on April 22nd of 2025, the DOJ unexpectedly canceled 365 grants totaling $800 million across programs across the country, including victim services and prosecutors' offices, juvenile justice crime prevention, including supporting critical messengers in communities that we know are taking guns out of children's hands, can go into spaces where our brothers and sisters in law enforcement can't. Those grants were canceled. In that same portfolio, we saw the breakdown, such as $535 million taken away from one particular grant, the Edward Bryan Justice Assistant Grant Program, $136 million of that from the Juvenile Justice Block Grants. I can go on. In May 2025, a group of senators came to push back. But again, this administration has shown us that while we virtue signal that we want safer streets, We continue to defund violence prevention programs. In fact, the White House closed down its office on gun violence prevention. I can go on and on. If we want safe communities, we will fully fund teachers. In the city of Washington, D.C., there are a limited amount of fully funded services for young people with mental health issues. So let's fully fund that. Let's fully fund job programs for every young person going door to door, filling out an application, trying to get a job. Let's fully fund that. Let's fully fund teachers who actually can live in Washington, D.C. and not have to commute 2 hours to and fro. Let's fully fund that. Let's make sure that Howard University has a hospital that can deeply treat folks who are suffering from chronic illnesses. Let's fully fund that. Let's ensure that when these brothers and sisters who have sworn to serve this country, when they leave, that there is a sustained violence prevention effort that is overly funded, where you all don't have to come to the Capitol to beg every single year to ensure that babies have lunch programs. Let's fund that. Because no mother in this audience wants to stand at that gravesite. No district attorney or no public defender wants to sit in a courtroom and grieve another life. What I think we are all saying here, regardless of how we vote, is that the people of Washington, D.C. deserve, one, self-determination, and that the children deserve to grow old. So we don't need quick fixes. What we need is a Congress that fully funds the district, fully funds education, fully funds reentry programs, fully funds accountability programs, fully funds rape kits, fully funds violence prevention as it relates to domestic violence. We know, we've heard from you, Free DC, what you need. And it is our obligation to do just that. Thank you all for being here today.
Chair recognizes Ms. Boebert from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting, all the funds that are needed for all these crime rehabilitation. I thought they were saying D.C. was such a safe and wonderful place, but really, I mean, Washington, D.C.'s crime rates remain significantly higher than the national average, particularly for violent and property crimes, despite recent declines, thanks to President Trump and this administration for taking action. Based on the most recent data from 2024, the latest full year figures available for 2025, the breakdown is key crime rates in D.C. versus the national average per 100,000 people in 2024. Violent crime in D.C. recorded 1,006 violent crimes per 100,000 residents compared to the U.S. average of 369. This makes D.C. violent crime rates 180% higher than the national average. There is a crime problem in Washington, D.C., and I may have time to go back to more of this. Just like the property crime rates had 3,693 property crimes per 100,000 versus the national average of 1,758. That's 109.8% higher property crimes here in Washington, D.C. I have a Ring doorbell cam at my residence where I live when I am in Washington, D.C., where I am here more than I am home. And unlike Democrats, I have one registered residence, and that's in Colorado. I don't go all over the country saying this is my prime residence. I lease here. But on that Ring door cam, I'm set up for a 5-mile radius of my home to get notifications of what's going on around me. And all day, every day, gunshots, cars stolen, porch pirates. Folks are getting their homes broken into on a regular basis, a daily basis. I get notifications on a Ring door cam, just neighbors talking to one another. What is going on? 5, 6, 8 gunshots just went off. Does anybody know anything? High-speed car chase. Oh no, another package stolen. My car was broken into. My car was stolen. My house was broken into. All day, every day in Washington, D.C. Do you know I have the same program in my home, for my home in a radius in Colorado, and I get my cat's missing, my dog's missing. Hey, I have a bike for sale. Does anybody want it? Do you want to purchase it? We don't hear gunshots. going off every single day. There is a crime problem here. And as far as having an issue, taking issue with the National Guard having a temporary presence to get your city, this city, our nation's beautiful capital, under control and safe, I didn't hear any problems from Washington, D.C. residents or my colleagues on the other side of the aisle when 20,000 National Guards came in and surrounded the Capitol building and prohibited your First Amendment rights to petition your government with your grievances. I didn't see an uprising there. We weren't happy about the fences and the hundreds of miles of barbed wire surrounding our nation's capital, and armed National Guard, tens of thousands of them, keeping you out of the people's house. But now they're here to help and keep you safe, and that's somehow an issue. I'm glad that we are having this hearing today. I'm glad that we are having this markup. I'm glad that we are having this debate. Whistleblowers have even told this very committee that they have faced pressure from Metropolitan Police Department leadership to manipulate crime statistics in Washington, D.C. Well, y'all live here. We're here a lot during the year. We see it. We don't need the data. We know it's manipulated because we see everything. You can't even go into a CVS store and get a bottle of shampoo because it's locked up. We want this to be a beautiful place for people to visit. The history here in this city is incredible. Our nation's capital should be celebrated. People should want to come here and certainly feel safe. And thanks to President Trump and the legislation that we are marking up today, it can be. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
The lady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Suberman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this bill has one provision I want to talk about for a second, which is, I think it's subsection E. It says to increase the speed and lower the costs of processing concealed carry license requests. This has been shown to actually increase gun violence, and especially if you don't include live fire training, that's a 32% increase in gun deaths. And I could go on and on with statistics about why this is a terrible idea. If you actually care about the safety of people in D.C., you're going to end up with people doing more concealed carry, more people with guns, more gun deaths. And this is precisely the reason why folks oppose this bill and D.C. residents oppose this bill, is because they didn't sign up for this. So they don't want this, right? They don't want to be subjected to more gun violence than they already are right now. And so I think that this provision is something that if you put it on the ballot in D.C., it'd be voted down very swiftly.
Will the gentleman yield?
On them. And so yes, I'll yield. Mm-hmm.
D.C. has some of the most complicated and strict gun laws in the country. Law-abiding residents who wish
I'm not going to yield my time, though. Do you have a question?
Well, I was just going to say that you said that basically criminals don't care about the law. And we don't change any of the procedures to get a concealed weapons permit. We just speed it up. That's all we do. We don't change any procedures. We just speed it up. You make law-abiding citizens helpless victims.
So what
it's
I don't
a
understand
God-given right. The Second Amendment, you're talking about the...
I don't understand what the provision is trying to do then, with all due respect.
It's just speeding up the ability for you to get a concealed weapons permit.
Well,
if you want a concealed weapons permit in D.C., you've got to wait months just to get an appointment. Criminals just go get a gun. They don't care. And so that's why you see 12-year-olds with a gun doing carjackings. The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And it's our God-given right to protect ourselves and our family. And so it speeds up the process.
I thank you for your comments, because I think the people in D.C. don't agree with that. And I also think that the evidence doesn't agree with that either. We're not going to agree on that today. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that the people of D.C. don't want this and don't agree with you. And by making the concealed carry permitting process more lax, you're not going to solve any sort of gun violence in the city. In fact, you're going to make it worse. That's what the evidence shows. It's not like no state has ever done this before. 29 states have done it, right? But the evidence is pretty clear that gun violence has gone up in many of those states because of that law. And so that's why. One of the reasons why I'm very much opposed to this bill is because of that specific provision. Because one, the people of D.C. don't want it. They don't think it works. works, it doesn't work. Two, it's been shown not to work either. And so if we're actually going to address gun violence, let's not make it worse. But that's what this bill does. I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield? Will the gentleman yield to me?
I'll yield back to the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you. No, I mean, it's just, it's good to hear from our Republican colleague here. He's concerned about the D.C. gun laws. He's concerned about gun violence in D.C. I'm not sure if the gentleman's aware that most guns used in crime in Washington, D.C. come from outside Washington, D.C., from states that don't have good gun laws. So my hope is, from hearing your concern today, maybe we can work together. Maybe we can pass universal background checks. Maybe we can pass federal legislation to make sure that every state plays by the same rules to make sure that we lower gun violence in this country and protect our people. I yield back.
Does any member seek recognition? Any other member seek recognition? Seeing none. Oh, Mr. Mfume.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to offer some perspective and perhaps something for the sponsor of this bill to think about. We really are debating something that's very, very basic to all of us, and that is whether or not we believe in the imposition of policy without participation of those who are being imposed upon. I mean, this is what the Boston Tea Party was about. Okay. This is why you hear in D.C. taxation without representation. This is why we don't even have a voting member in the House of Delegates outside of a delegate. Because of this situation where we believe that we can impose policy without participation from the people who are being governed. Now, I want to just ask the sponsor of the bill a question. You said, sir, and with all due respect, that there was so much here you didn't understand, and one of the things you didn't understand was why we, I assume that meant those of us on this side of the aisle, wanted to protect drug dealers. I'm making the assumption you really didn't mean that the way you said it. I hope it was rhetorical, because it's clear that members on this side of the aisle are just as opposed to crime, drug dealers, lunatics, rapists, and anybody else as you are on your side of the aisle.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I will not yield just yet. So I'm assuming it was rhetorical, that you did not have an underlying assumption that we are somehow protecting and supporting those sorts of criminals. Now, this whole thing about imposition of policy, none of us, if we are honest, would have any kind of situation in our district like this unless we raised holy hell. We would lay down and tie up the government before we would let policy be imposed on us and the people we represent. Right or wrong, there is a practice here, and we ought to at least recognize and say there is a practice. For those members on this side of the aisle, and I'm speaking now just for myself, but I assume that the others will agree, there is no safe haven for rapists and for murderers and for child molesters and criminals. There ought never be. In fact, they ought to be put underneath the jail, sir. And there is no real safe haven that anybody is advocating. Now, let me just dial back for a minute to a time when dinosaurs ruled this earth. Way back in 1987, I met at the White House with President Reagan, with Congressman Fauntroy, who represented the district at that time, to talk about this whole notion of home rule and the people of D.C. having an opportunity to govern themselves. If you'll check the record, the president at that time supported that. He believed in it. And he advocated that we find a way, whenever we want to do something, to have a conversation with the people that are being governed. I don't know that that conversation has occurred. I've not seen a meeting anywhere where we've gone out into the community as a committee to try to have that conversation. I have voted for every pro-DC act here in the Congress since 1987, so I've got a long telescope of what's been happening and what's not been happening. I sponsored and voted for the first bill to provide D.C. statehood in 1993. I have worked with Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton on all since then, including the one that we barely lost 2 years ago. So when people here get upset, it's not because they just don't have anything to do. You wouldn't want somebody imposing policy on you unless you had a chance, no matter what the law was, to give your side of the story, to hear what you have to say, and to understand your position. So let me just say that this whole imposition of policy, I know what the Constitution says. I know about the district being governed by the Congress and the president. I understand that. But let me remind you, Donald Trump was president for 4 years. Crime in D.C. was higher when he was president. Crime now has gone down significantly to 30-year lows. So I don't understand what happened between the first term in office and the second term to suggest that there is something out of control here. That is not really the case. And if he does believe that, I would say to the president and his people, why not have a conversation with the people who are being governed here? Whether you agree with them or not, they have a say. They are Americans. They pay taxes. They serve in the military. They do all the things everybody else can do, except they, in this instance, have to live with your imposition of policy. So while the gentleman who introduced this may have great intentions, I would just say, in the rhetoric around the bill, let's not make the assumption that people in D.C. like being led. Let's not make the assumption that Democrats support crime. Let's not make the assumption that God Almighty has bestowed upon you something that is lacking upon others because you have a difference of opinion. I will vote no on this bill, no on the others that come up that seek to do the same thing, and hell no on final passage. I yield back.
All right, gentleman yields back. For what purpose does Mr. Bell seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Will the clerk please report the amendment?
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5103 is offered by Mr. Bell of Missouri.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. I reserve a point of order. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Bell, is recognized 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
So as a former prosecutor, I understand the harmful impacts that bills like this one that we're considering can have on our communities. We've heard a lot of conversations, and so I want to kind of put this all together and let's talk about actual solutions, because we've heard a lot of cliches, a good guy with a gun and a bad guy with a gun. That's just called a shootout. That's not safe at all. We've heard the National Guard. Yeah, if you put an occupational force, that will tamp down on crime temporarily, but what happens the day after? It's like putting on deodorant and not taking a shower. That's only going to hold up for so long, right? And so if we're serious about addressing crime, then we got to be serious about the solutions. And I'll push back on what many of my colleagues said. This is not a common sense issue. This is driven by data. When we look at gun violence, we see that as the gun laws have been loosened, the gun violence has gone up. We have more people dying in this country than any other country in the world by gun violence. And the more and the less gun restrictions, the more gun violence. So what we're talking about is just simply common sense gun safety laws. We think that there should be violent history checks to make sure we know who has guns. Republicans oppose that. We talk about policing, community policing. We want a police department that is representative of the people that it police. When I was prosecutor and when I was city councilman in Ferguson, what we were looking at was reforming our police department so that they didn't get promoted based on how many people they arrested. We wanted them to get promoted in accolades for how many people they knew in the community, because that's how you build trust in a community. Addressing root causes. You can't incarcerate your way out of mental health. You can't incarcerate your way out of substance abuse disorder. You got to treat it. If you send somebody with mental health to jail, they're just going to come out with a worse problem, and they're likely to graduate to violent crimes. Same thing with substance abuse. And so this amendment is about delivering real, tangible investments in the District of Columbia. investments that prioritize public safety, community well-being, and long-term progress. Let's invest in the resources that the folks need in DC. Let's invest in food assistance, youth programs, housing, mental health services. Perfect segue from my colleague, Representative Simon. Let's fund those. That's what this amendment is about. Instead of I heard him talk about being elitist. I think it's elitist when you're telling people how they should want to be governed. And just because you have a smooth Southern accent doesn't change the fact that it's still elitist. And so here, by funding these types of things, now we're giving the folks in D.C. the tools that they need to address those problems that we've been talking about all morning. We can equip D.C. with the resources it needs to address those root crimes, not just the symptoms. And so this is a comprehensive approach to public safety that recognizes that prevention is just as essential as enforcement. And so when we talk about making D.C. beautiful, we should be talking about investing in the people of D.C., not just cleaning graffiti off the walls. The true beauty of this city lies in its residents, its native communities, and the culture they have already built. And so let's equip them with the resources and funding to support one another. I yield my time to the ranking member. If he wants.
Yeah, I'm actually going to speak next, Mr. Bell. So, Mr. Comer.
All right. Gentleman yields back. I'll recognize myself. While I'm very supportive of proper allocations of financial resources to Washington, D.C. within its local budget, we are not the Appropriations Committee. We're the Oversight Committee. We should be working these conversations through the regular budget and appropriations process. And I want to say this today, and I've said this publicly many times, I strongly support if we have a continuing resolution and the president recommends anomalies and things like that we restore the funding for Washington, D.C. that was supposedly inadvertently removed from the last budget we passed. So that's something that I support, and I think most of the members on my side of the aisle support. We recognize that that money was money that Washington, D.C. had budgeted, and that money should be in Washington, D.C.'s budget.
Mr. Chair,
so that's something.
I think we have to reverse the amendments, and I think you're replying to the amendment that Ms. Ansari is about to introduce, as opposed to the one that I just introduced, because initially her amendment was going to lead. I just want to make sure people are following us.
Yeah, I think. Are we okay on that? The two parliamentarians are working this out. We're good. All right, we're fine. So, and I just want everyone to know, I communicate with the mayor. I've met at least 2 times with the chairman of the D.C. Council. So when we work on this legislation, because this committee has legislative jurisdiction over Washington, D.C., there's a lot of communication that takes place, not just with myself and the mayor and the chairman of the D.C. Council, but also between the oversight staff and the mayor's office and the council staff. So this isn't, as Ms. Stansbury suggested, just something that popped out of midair. There have been a lot of conversations and communication. Now, we don't always agree, but we are working together, and I'm, as chairman of this committee, working with the local elected officials in D.C. to try to do things like the D.C. Stadium bill and to try to restore funding that was, for whatever reason, removed from the last spending bill. So today, we are focused on specific criminal code reforms and federal executive authorities that are needed. So this amendment also dispenses with the underlying bill. I therefore oppose this amendment. Does any other member seek recognition? Ranking member.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to add my support to this amendment. I think that Mr. Bell is exactly right. And just as a reminder, and this was said by some of the members earlier, but crime has been decreasing in the district. It is at historic lows. You look at the last couple of years before Donald Trump made the decisions to bring in the Guard, this council and this mayor, and most importantly, the community, has been working on issues of violence prevention, on investing in services, which we know lead to crime reduction. That is a fact that's been well researched across this country. And just as a reminder, in August of 2025, the president actually announced, of course, that he plans to work with Congress to somehow raise this $2 billion to make the district safer. But there has been no plan and no specifics, just empty promises that the president continues to make. And so this amendment does fulfill some of that promise. It actually puts together a plan that actually would invest in the district. It's $2 billion, I know that has been discussed. We're talking about reducing homelessness, expanding access to health care, providing food assistance to residents in need, supporting victims of crime, which is so important, and investing in mental health services. We know these types of investments actually can be used to reduce crime, not just here, but across the country. And Congress should be a partner to the district. We should not be using it as a political prop. We should be a constructive partner that helps D.C. to hire their own, make local investments, and bring the community in. So let's please address public safety in the way that we best know how, and that's to put D.C. residents and the community first and invest in programs we know that will actually work. And so with that, I urge the adoption of Mr. Bell's amendment.
Does any other member seek recognition on the Bell amendment? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment offered by Mr. Bell from Missouri. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
Recorded vote, sir.
A recorded vote is ordered as previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. For what purpose does Ms. Ansari seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment on the desk.
Will the clerk please report the amendment?
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5103 as offered by Ms. Ansari of Arizona.
Okay. Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. I reserve a point of order. Ms. Ansari is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier this year, the Trump administration and congressional Republicans unilaterally withheld $1 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars from D.C. that is part of the city's local government budget. I'll repeat, these funds are all D.C. raised revenue. A Senate-passed fix has been sitting on Speaker Johnson's desk since March 18th. It is outrageous that this city is micromanaged to such a degree by the federal government, unlike any other American city. And on top of that, the administration can apparently decide to cut or withhold an enormous portion of the city's budget just because it feels like it. This is an issue of fairness, justice, and keeping the government's word to over 700,000 Americans who are denied full and equal rights. How can the Trump administration literally steal $1 billion from D.C. without any justification or resource? Imagine if this were Phoenix or Los Angeles or Las Vegas or Dallas. I'm the former vice mayor of Phoenix, Arizona, the 5th largest city in the country, and I can tell you that a $1 billion withholding of budget from a city government has massive implications. It should be no different for Washington, D.C. While this is the city's capital, it is also home to hundreds of thousands of hardworking people. What might actually have an impact on keeping people safe and healthy in our nation's capital? That would be the $1 billion of withheld funding for critical programs that keep this city running. Funds that are D.C.'s, not the federal government's money. But Donald Trump obviously believes that this city is his personal playground. He has deployed the U.S. military to its streets because he wants to feel powerful, because he is a dictator. And he wants to deflect from the fact that the biggest criminal in this city is himself, sitting and occupying the White House at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. My colleagues have mentioned DC's crime rate is at a 30-year low. So what does Trump have our nation's service members, many of who've been taken from their jobs, from their families as reservists, what are they doing here in Washington, D.C.? He has them picking up trash, sitting around bored, directing traffic. I've seen this firsthand with my own eyes. It's been mentioned. The way it sounds from my colleagues, they're more worried about their own personal safety here. I can tell you I feel very safe here, walking around my Navy Yard neighborhood. But our president is more interested in photo ops and seeming like a tough strongman than he is about spending government resources on the programs and policies that keep us safe, whether that's investing in counter-narcotics programs or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. He has literally redirected counterterrorism and human trafficking resources away from their intended purpose and toward non-violent immigration offenses. So that's why I hope this committee can come together in a bipartisan manner to fix this grave mistake that is costing Washington, D.C. Making this right will make this city and region safer, stronger, and better for everyone. To not do so would be a violation of our responsibilities and a stain on this committee and Congress. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I'll recognize myself. And again, I support restoring that funding. I don't believe it was Donald Trump that took the funding. I think it was Congress that took the funding, either inadvertently or whatever. So I support restoring the funding, but I cannot support this amendment because it would strike the text of the underlying bill, which enacts President Trump's executive order on making the District of Columbia safe and beautiful. So I oppose your amendment, but I support the objective. And again, I have asked that that be restored in the as one of the anomalies if we go the CR route, which I would assume that's the route we're going to go. And that's something that in the meetings I've had with both Mayor Bowser and Middleton, they both requested that, obviously. And I think that should be restored. Now, I don't know. I'm speaking for myself, not everyone on the committee, but I support, again, what you're doing, but the amendment affects the underlying bill, so that's why I oppose the amendment. Does any other member seek recognition? I'll recognize the ranking member, then Mr. Biggs.
Thank you. I just want to thank Ms. Ansari for the amendment, and I think, Mr. Chairman, I think you've acknowledged that this was a mistake made by the Congress, by the majority, by the Speaker, and so this is an opportunity to fix a real horrific mistake that is hurting the district. To lose that amount of money, $1 billion in funding to provide for services is completely irresponsible. And Congress has an opportunity right now, this committee has an opportunity right now to actually fix the issue it's created. And so I think this amendment does that. I want to thank Congresswoman Ansari for doing that. This is another example of why Congress should not be the super city council for Washington, D.C. It cannot continue its efforts to try to take control over the district. Now, Speaker Johnson and the House, by the way, have refused to enact a simple fix. They have not moved forward in fixing this enormous mistake. Instead, D.C. today and across, in most days, just hear any of the debates, they want to use the district as a political prop. This bill froze $1 billion from the D.C. budget, threatening city services, and I do commend the community and the D.C. government for moving forward even with this horrific cut and mistake. Now, we don't need National Guardsmen picking up trash if we just let D.C. use their own money to fund normal city services. We should fix this issue, which the amendment does, and I want to thank Ms. Ansari, and I urge a yes vote.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And really what I'm doing, I've got some unanimous consents. So this one's entitled, Murdered Congressional Intern's Mom Says Trump Should Take Over Washington, D.C. Trump's D.C. crime crackdown overwhelmingly benefits black Americans as homicides hit zero. This one from February 12, 2024. Yes, prosecuting and arresting criminals would have immediate impact on D.C.'s crime. This one from just the other day. Trump's D.C. crime crackdown nets murder suspects, sex criminals, illegal immigrants, and more in one night. This one. Trump's D.C. crime operation puts safety of families first as arrests surge past 1,800. This one from a couple days ago. D.C. wards 7 and 8 see drop in crime during federal law enforcement surge. This one from 8 days ago. Trump's Labor Day crime crackdown in D.C. nets 70 arrests, including illegal aliens. This one. This was from last November. Police arrest man suspected in a dozen sex assaults in D.C. And that's where I'll stop for now, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered. Okay. Any other members seek recognition on the amendment? Seeing none, the question is now on the, amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
Request a recorded vote, please.
Recorded vote is ordered by the ranking members previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 5214, the District of Columbia Cash Bail Reform Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5214, the District of Columbia Cash Bail Reform Act, a bill to require mandatory pretrial and post-conviction detention for crimes of violence and dangerous crimes, and mandatory cash bail for certain offenses that pose a threat to public safety or order in the District of Columbia and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment. Point. Without objection to order, the chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk please designate the amendment. An
amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5214 as offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purpose of further amendment. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. I strongly support the District of Columbia Cash Bail Reform Act. This bill requires pretrial detention for individuals charged with crimes of violence and dangerous crimes and cash bail for individuals charged with public safety and order crimes. For far too long, dangerous criminals have been allowed to roam the streets of D.C., posing a threat to the general public. Before this bill, progressive judges could release criminals to D.C. streets with only a promise that they will not reoffend and will return to court for their trial date. This bill eliminates this judicial discretion by requiring pretrial detention for those charged with crimes of violence and cash bail or bail bonds for all defendants charged with certain public safety and law and order crimes. This is a smart and long overdue reform that rectifies the ill-conceived policies currently enacted in the district. I urge all of my colleagues to support this common sense public safety bill. I now recognize the ranking member for his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly oppose the D.C. Cash Bail Reform Act, and I want to just share why. This bill once again interferes with D.C. law and makes major changes to D.C.'s pretrial release and detention law. Now, the bill would require pretrial detention based solely on a charge. It will also prevent pretrial release for certain crimes unless a defendant posts a secure appearance bond. Now, no one on this committee wants dangerous people on the streets after they've been arrested. But D.C.'s pretrial release and detention law is actually substantially similar to the federal pretrial release and detention law in place. Now, under both D.C. and federal law, right now, pretrial release and detention decisions are based on an assessment by a judge of a defendant's risk of flight and danger to the community. And that's how it should be. In our system, you are innocent until proven guilty. Detention decisions should be made based on risk, not on wealth or your access to pay. The Pretrial Service Agency for D.C. provides the pretrial services for both the U.S. District Court for D.C. and the D.C. Superior Court. It's actually a federal agency, and it is extremely effective by national standards. D.C.'s pretrial flight and rearrest rates are actually lower than the national rates. Now, this problematic bill has two main components. Component one is a mandatory pretrial detention for the period before trial based solely on a charge without necessary hearings, which is likely unconstitutional based on a 1987 Supreme Court ruling. And we're not aware, by the way, of any state, city, county, or territory that mandates pretrial detention for the period before trial based solely on a charge. We should stand for due process and reject this dangerous policy. Now, second, the other component of the bill that's incredibly problematic is the bill prohibits pretrial release for certain offenders unless a defendant posts a secured appearance bond. Pretrial release should be based on your danger to the public and your flight risk, not on your wealth. Pretrial detention can have significant consequences for a defendant and their family, including lost jobs, income, housing, and child custody. This bill would essentially lock up more people that are of low income in this community. And again, in pretrial, you are innocent until proven guilty. Now, finally, the data is clear that imposing financial conditions on pretrial release has no effect on crime rates. We should oppose the D.C. Cash Bail Reform Act on its merits. We should also oppose it because it violates D.C.'s self-government. And bill after bill being presented today moves back the ability for D.C. to govern itself. So I urge members to vote no on this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Boebert from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a fierce advocate for law and order, I support Congresswoman Stefanik's District of Columbia Cash Bail Reform Act. Our nation's capital is reeling from crime crisis, worsened by cashless bail policies that let violent criminals, murderers, rapists, carjackers walk free before trial, endangering residents, federal workers, and visitors. Democrats have proven they are not soft on crime. They are pro-crime. They are pro-carjacking, pro-rape, pro-murder, pro-criminals with these policies. This bill restores accountability, ensuring safety in Washington, D.C. The statistics are absolutely alarming. In 2023, D.C. reported 274 homicides, a 20-year high, with a rate of 39.4 per 100,000 residents, surpassing New York City's 5.5 and rivaling Chicago's. Carjackings surged 547% from 2018 to 2023, with 140 incidents in June of 2023 alone. While 2024 saw a 35% drop in violent crime, homicides down to 32% to 187, robberies down 39%, and armed carjackings down 53%. 2025 data shows that 99 homicides by August, a 12% increase from 2024, but still, that is troubling. Total violent crimes in 2024 hit 22,320, with 21,437 assaults. Motor vehicle thefts up 9% in 2025 and reached 3,136 by September. These numbers absolutely demand action. Cashless bail fuels this very chaos, creating a revolving door for repeat offenders. To see how cashless bail is working in real time, let's look at what happened to Irana Zurich. So I'm so sorry for saying her name wrong. I will get the Ukrainian language down, but the wonderful woman who was violently murdered just this week, a Ukrainian refugee seeking safety in Charlotte. She was brutally murdered on a train by a man with a violent past, and was repeatedly released despite prior arrests for robbery, assault, and erratic behavior. This man has been arrested and let go 14 times due to Democrats' pro-crime policies. Cashless bail and lenient pretrial policies let dangerous individuals cycle through our streets, endangering innocent lives like Irana's. We need to take action to ensure repeat offenders aren't free to murder innocent victims, and so no family endures such senseless loss again. Cashless bail promotes this kind of violence. There was no help for this man that was actually enforced. He was not institutionalized. He was not forced to seek help. And he was let go 14 times to repeat these kind of crimes. And this is the same thing that we see in Washington, D.C. when we have cashless bail. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentlelady yields. Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly oppose this bill, which amends D.C. law. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record letters opposing the bill from D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, the entire D.C. Council, and D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab.
Without objection, so ordered.
This bill is paternalistic and undemocratic. The over 700,000 D.C. residents, the majority of whom are black and brown, are capable and worthy of governing themselves. The D.C. Council has 13 members. If residents do not like how the members vote, residents can vote them out of office or pass a ballot measure. This is called democracy. Congress has 535 voting members. D.C. residents do not like how the members vote on local matters. Residents cannot vote them out of office or pass a ballot measure. This is the antithesis of democracy. While the substance of this bill is irrelevant, since there is never justification for Congress to legislate on local D.C. matters, I will briefly discuss it. The D.C. law is not unique. The fact is, it is very similar to the federal pretrial release and detention law, and the same well-regarded federal agency provides pretrial services in both the federal and local trial courts in D.C. Under both federal and D.C. law, federal and detention decisions are based on a defendant's wealth, not on any assessment of by a judge or whether a defendant will appear and is a danger to another person or the community. Nevertheless, judges have the authority to impose financial conditions on release. Detention is a severe restriction on the liberty of an individual who is presumed innocent. This bill mandates pretrial detention without a hearing for certain crimes, that it likely violates the the due process clause of the Constitution. I urge the majority to read the Supreme Court's 1987 decision that upheld the constitutionality of federal pretrial and detention law. The court stressed the law's procedural protections for defendants. The court said, quote, in our social liberty is the norm, and detention prior to trial or without trial is the carefully limited exception. We hold that the provisions for pretrial detention in the Home Rule Act of 1984 fall within that carefully limited exception. The Act authorizes the detention prior to the trial of arrestees charged with serious felonies who are found after an adversary hearing to pose a threat to the safety of the individuals, to the community, which no condition release can dispel. The numerous procedural safeguards detailed above must attend this adversary hearing, close quote. This bill requires pretrial detention without any adversary hearing. Finally, the bill introduces commercial bail industry.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
I yield back.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Who else seeks recognition? Oh, Mr. Lynch. I'm going to recognize Mr. Lynch for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to associate myself with the remarks of the ranking member earlier. I do want to point out that this statute, this change in the law, would expand the number and type of offenses against public safety or public order that now apply in Washington, D.C. I think
I didn't say it.
The ranking member earlier spoke to the impact of the residents of D.C., and I just want to add another dimension to this. As we all know, Washington, D.C. is the place where the American people often come to exercise their right to petition their government. Throughout our history here in D.C., going back to the veterans' protests, the bonus army in 1932 during the Depression, going back to Dr. King's rally in support of jobs and freedom, where 500,000 people followed him here for the purpose of petitioning their government. You can look at the Black Lives Matter rallies that occurred more recently, the Women's March back in 2020, and so many others. This law as written would introduce pretrial detention for anyone charged with an offense against public safety or public order. The current statute in Washington, D.C., which is amended by this, currently regards excessive noise or behavior which may disrupt the tranquility of the community as an offense against public safety or public order. So this will impinge not only upon the daily activities of the people of Washington, D.C., but it will also, I believe, violate the constitutional right of the American people to come here and to petition their own government. They will now, after this bill is passed, be exposed to detention pre-trial, detention without recourse, detention that will continue unless they make bail, which is new and different. So, look, I've been a part-time resident of Washington, D.C. for almost 25 years. And from my own experience, having been here 4 days a week, 5 days a week for the past 25 years, things have gotten a lot better in D.C. Things have gotten a lot better. I remember when we had significant challenges. That is not the case today. We have an excellent police force. We have wonderful leadership at the city council level, and we've had a string of mayors here that I think have tried their level best to do what is right and to represent the people of the district, the residents of the district, even though we have curtailed those rights by statute. This is an assault on the self-determination of the residents of Washington, D.C., and they deserve better than this. They deserve better than this. It is one thing to have the burden of living here without active representation. It is quite another to have Congress intervene on the basic functions of daily life that the people of D.C. endure and go about each and every day. this series of bills is an overreach, and we should defeat it and return the right to make those decisions back to the mayor, the district city council, and the people of Washington, D.C. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. Mimfume.
Mr. Chairman, the distinguished gentlewoman from the District of Columbia did not have enough time in making the points that she was trying to make, so I would respectfully yield the balance of my time to her.
You're recognized. He's yielded time to you, Ms. Bowden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finally, this bill introduces the commercial bail industry and bounty hunters into local D.C. courts. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill and to pass the D.C. statehood bill instead, which will give D.C. residents voting representation in Congress and full social self-government. Full local self-government. D.C. is not unique. In fact, it is very similar to the federal pretrial release and detention law, and the same well-regarded federal agency provides pretrial services in both the federal and local trial courts in D.C. Under both federal and D.C. law, release and detention decisions